Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for Measuring the Value of Employee Recognition, sponsored by Halo Recognition and presented by Cord Himelstein. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you that this webcast has been pre-approved for HRCI and SHRM credits. Please be sure to attend the complete webcast in order to receive your credits. If you have any questions today for Cord, or for myself, hr.com, please type them into the Questions tab on your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll be sure to follow up with you. It's now my pleasure to turn you over to Cord Himelstein.
Thank you, Sylvie. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join today's presentation, Measuring the Value of Employee Recognition. So let's get started. So just to go over what we'll be talking about today and what we'll be getting into. It's understanding that clear goal setting and relevant measurement are the keys to success in measuring the value of recognition. We know organizations spend a lot of money on employee recognition annually, $100 billion annually. We know that recognition is an investment that delivers both tangible and intangible outcomes. So the general goal of recognition has been to increase engagement and tying it back to ROI. As we know, there are numerous studies around the impact of employee engagement, but I typically refer to a study by Gallup Business Journal called How Employee Engagement Drives Growth. They observed the work habits of highly engaged work groups compared to poorly engaged work groups. They found that work units in the top quartile in employee engagement outperformed bottom quartile units by 10% on customer ratings, 22% in profitability, and 21% in productivity. So the benefits of recognition take time and energy to realize, but once you set your goals, it's extremely important that you understand where you stand so that you can benchmark your progress. Recognition has many positive effects in many places of an organization. When working well, its benefits go far beyond increased profits. In general, these are the things an effective employee recognition program should affect and influence. Increase employee engagement, decrease voluntary turnover, foster a culture of recognition and respect, and these correlate with better business performance, longer tenures, and higher productivity and morale. So if you're looking at starting a program or revising one, these are some of the pieces that you're going to want to focus in on. Recognition can assist in most of these, but measuring its effects are tricky because it's not always quantitative. But you may be looking for different results, or there may be results you weren't aware of. So let's take a look at some of the ways satisfied, engaged, and happy employees can have far-reaching effects. Oh, this is a great story. For those of you that don't know, that's Jeffrey Owens. He was formerly from the Cosby Show, and this past weekend, he was pictured working at a Trader Joe's in New Jersey, I believe it was. Now, so this may not be related to recognition ROI, but I love this story. It's a mashup of the gig economy, employee pride, the generational workforce, and mixed with so many other relevant and positive views of life and work. We'll be talking about a little bit later the intangible effects, but this is a picture of him appearing on Good Morning America this week. And there he is wearing his Trader Joe's name badge, which I thought was great. He's proud that he works there. They're proud that he works there. And it was a great moment for both of them. But let's get back on track. So here are a few ways engaged employees correlate with some not so obvious results, like high-performing employees have three things in common: tenures of a decade or more, they are engaged in their work, and job expectations are aligned well with their innate talents. Then there's high performance. So, and workplace stress. So 57% of employees who said they were very stressed at work felt less productive and disengaged, while only 10% of low stress employees reported feeling this way. And then shrinkage. So teams with high employee engagement rates are 21% more productive and have 28% less internal theft than those with low engagement. So now let's look at a few ways engaged employees correlate with more obvious results. We see that engaged employees can also affect profits, customer retention, and overall growth. Increasing employee engagement investments by 10% can increase profits by $2,400 per employee per year. And customer retention rates are 18% higher on average when employees are highly engaged. Organizations with highly engaged employees had an average 3-year revenue growth, 2.3 times greater than companies whose employees were only engaged at an average level. There are so many outcomes from employee engagement that you can't really put a price on. For instance, when an employee recommends their company in a social media post, or a positive review on Glassdoor that reaches thousands, if not millions of people. Or on the flip side, what is the collateral damage affected by a negative review on Glassdoor? Can you really put a price on things like word of mouth? It could be challenging, but you can measure how far it reaches, and that's the important piece. The value lies in how many of these effects can you make happen. We can measure profits and productivity to an extent, but there are many X factors that go into what makes recognition valuable that will rely on qualitative assessments, which is why a huge part of recognition ROI is establishing your own benchmarks and measurement schemes that are relevant to your company. You must choose the value. Decide how valuable these things are to you. Is spending X amount of dollars per employee worth reducing absenteeism even by a day? Or getting X amount of Instagram shares with your hashtag? How much are you willing to spend on improving culture? Recognition programs cannot answer these questions for you. They only provide the tools to get you there. Where value is concerned, only you can know how much these things are worth to you and your organization and make measurements based on that. You're probably thinking by now, what's all this talk about value? What about ROI? So ROI is a sort of misnomer for recognition programs. Not everything in them can be monetized, and their value can be expressed in many ways. Recognition has cascading effects on a workforce, and you have to understand how you measure it. While not everything can be monetized, they still hold value. So resisting the urge to monetize everything can be challenging. Some aspects of recognition, like sales incentives, safety programs, are more easily monetized because they're built that way. But when we get into the realm of employee engagement, culture, employee experience, it becomes a lot blurrier. It's not impossible, but it does take some finesse. That's why this presentation is focused on measuring the value of these programs and not geared toward a hard and fast ROI formula. In reality, there is no hard and fast ROI formula for recognition. It is entirely dependent on what your specific plans and goals are for the program. So I urge you to keep an open mind about how you will measure and report on recognition progress. When you're communicating value in the form of employee satisfaction, engagement, and feedback, we must accept that some recognition effects are going to be harder to measure than others. Here's our first poll question, which is a good baseline to establish before we go into strategy. Sylvie? So the question is, does your organization have a written strategy for measuring recognition ROI? Yes or no? Okay, Sylvie, if we can see the results. So 11% of the people on this call, their organization has a written strategy for measuring recognition ROI, and 90% don't. So that's quite a number, but it is consistent with a lot of the studies that we'll get into after this slide. So thank you very much for participating. Okay. Sorry, everybody. I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties with my slide. Okay, here we go. So measuring the value of recognition. Again, take the term ROI with a grain of salt. Rather than a return on investment, we are more searching for a return on recognition. Your investment in recognition is going to be around 1 to 2% of payroll, and that's based on industry averages provided by World at Work. Your return is going to be a mixture of several benefits that recognition can achieve, and they won't always be relatable back to the initial investment. Organizations like Gallup have statisticians, algorithms, and full-on research teams devoted to figuring out specific dollar amounts achieved from recognition. But even these are not entirely accurate because profit increases can be influenced by several factors. We know that recognition makes employees more engaged, but how engagement equates to profits is a whole other dilemma apart from recognition. You shouldn't need to be a statistician to measure the ROI of your recognition program. So let's look and see how we can do this. There's 4 steps. The first step is choose your desired outcomes. So create a story about your recognition ROI. And these are some good questions to ask when creating your recognition ROI story. What does the future look like? Doc Brown, what does the future look like? What are your concrete recognition goals? To be successful, what has to happen? Which qualitative and quantitative metrics are important? And why are people getting rewarded in your organization? What behaviors embody your goals? So these are just a few questions to ask as you're determining your outcomes. You probably already have an idea of outcomes you want in your mind. So have a meeting or two and hash them out. In the design and engineering phase, you want to create a story about your recognition ROI. Why? Because stories have beginnings and ends, which means you can accurately measure the change that occurs from point A to point B. When you report on ROI, you will have to find some way to communicate this story in terms of gains and losses. Here are just a few tips to help the entire design and engineering process go smoother. Begin advocacy early. It's a great time to start getting your internal teams and senior leaders on board and excited about making it a successful program. Ask for lots of opinions and viewpoints and let everyone contribute something to foster a sense of ownership. This will also increase the variety of perspectives on the program and will give you more collective wisdom on how you approach the strategy. Embrace change. The only constant is change, and your needs and desires will evolve. So give yourself time and embrace the fact that you may have to alter your plan or try a new approach down the road. In the beginning, the point is not to necessarily get it right, but to get it written. Like we just saw from the previous poll, about 90% of you don't have a written ROI strategy down for your organization. So write it down somewhere. Speaking of that, write it down somewhere. It might be funny, but World at Work's 2017 Trends Survey shows that only 55% of organizations who use recognition actually have a written strategy in place, so it bears repeating. And then work openly with vendors. Recognition program vendors play a large part in design and strategy, larger than they ever did before, and should be able to lend expertise and collaborative service to help speed things along. Ask employees. Ideas in the boardroom may not always translate well to the front line. Be sure you're including your employees in the design process by polling them about the current state of recognition and asking what kind of change they'd like to see. Think broadly. Again, recognition ROI isn't always a hard dollar or tangible results. Understand the behaviors as well as the numbers you might be looking for to reach your goals. Be sure to think broadly about what is actually relevant to your recognition ROI goals. What is the real return on investment you're looking for? Think creatively about which intangibles you might be able to measure or capture using the tech and tools at your disposal. Measuring behavior is easier than ever before with our current technology. You can measure clicks, logins, and all kinds of activity that will help identify intangible measurements. And so these are some of the intangible things you can measure: presenteeism, teamwork, morale, productivity, innovation, and culture building. Benchmark everything. So it's impossible to show progress without having a starting point. So you're going to want to identify, benchmark, and measure. I'll stress the importance of benchmarking here. When you've chosen your outcomes, it is extremely important to benchmark everything you hope to measure, for the simple reason that you can't manage what you don't measure. If you want to report progress, start with a solid benchmark. Many of our clients come to us for program changes because they have a benchmark they're unhappy with. It could be employee engagement. It could be their turnover numbers. This is where your entire strategy begins. More on identifying those benchmarks later. What's really important is to not overwhelm yourself. Don't overcomplicate your goals and settle on a handful of initiatives tied to your outcomes to start. Keep it simple and manageable. Building an effective recognition program, it's a layering process. You want to establish a baseline with a few initiatives, observe how they work, and then either lay on or draw them back as you move forward. This is where it can get tricky, and why it's important to give yourself some simple goals and benchmarks to allow you to follow the results cleanly. A simple set of goals is easier to adapt to changing conditions and is also easier to manage. So, in choosing your desired outcomes, each initiative should have one goal, one primary goal. That's not to say that they can't have residual effects, but you want to understand and identify what that primary goal is for that initiative. They should be relevant to the culture of your organization. They should be memorable and fun, and there should be participation incentives. Think creatively about how you can make your recognition initiatives more appealing to encourage adoption and usage and push participants towards your desired outcomes. You can do this by making them relevant to your specific culture, making them fun and memorable, and by offering participation incentives through your recognition system. Don't be afraid to stack the deck as much as you can toward the outcome you desire. The more purpose and intention you can put behind initiatives, the more accurate the resulting measurements will be. So be aware of the challenges with measuring the outcomes you want. Consider which measurements are going to be a challenge and work out a sensible approach to measuring them. Remember, if you can't measure it, it doesn't count. Moreover, you can't manage what you don't measure. So some of the easier outcomes you can measure are retention, sales, and productivity. And some of the harder, more challenging outcomes could be tenure, culture change, employee experience. Okay, so step 2. Let's talk more about identifying the recognition metrics that will serve you best. In step 2, identifying relevant metrics, there are 2 types of metrics at play with recognition, and those are tangibles and intangibles. So as we've mentioned, tangibles are easy to measure and reduce to a number. Intangibles will rely more heavily on frontline observations, employee and manager feedback, and less concrete assessments. So the tangibles. business performance, turnover, customer satisfaction, net promoter scores, safety, and sales performance. And as we've mentioned, the more intangible, presenteeism, teamwork, morale, productivity, innovation, culture building, and engagement. So here are some tangible KPIs we find very useful when measuring recognition ROI. World at Work, who conducts the largest recognition survey of its kind, it's over 5,000 organizations across several industries, has been asking about recognition usage data since 2013. In their 2017 Trends in Recognition report, they found that out of 89% of organizations that have recognition programs in place, only 52% consider usage and participation rates as a measurement for success. That is the second most used method to the measure, with employee satisfaction and surveys being the most used at 57%. And number of nominations was third at 43%. Fourth is turnover, and a distant fifth is productivity at just 16%. So anyone can look at usage rates and gain some benefit and insight from it, and it's easy to do. You just have to have a concrete idea of the goal you're looking for. Dig into usage data and don't just look at overall usage and logins, but when are employees accessing the site? How are they accessing the site? Are they doing it through their desktop? Are they doing it through mobile? What are their bounce rates and exit pages? So some of the tangible KPIs that can be measured are formal recognition. And these are acts of recognition performed within a formal reward system given from the company to employees, managers to employees, or peer-to-peer. Usage data, standard capture data relating to the usage of the recognition program software, websites and tools such as logins, number of award redemptions, types of rewards issues, budgets, and other things. Employee satisfaction, company-wide employee engagement and recognition program surveys based on an official model or developed in-house. Here are some of the more popular intangible KPIs. So measuring intangible KPIs are tricky. You'll need some method or process for getting details and feedback from managers and frontline employees. This could be in the form of a survey. You'll hear me mention surveys quite a bit. They're probably the top source for reporting on intangible recognition ROI. So conduct team surveys or use an HR tool to collect quick feedback on the teamwork and personal satisfaction levels. So some of these intangible KPIs include informal recognition, which shows discretionary acts of recognition performed outside the formal system. The off-the-cuff praise, recognition at team meetings, the attaboys, the buying coffee. Manager-employee relations, a top driver of employee engagement and satisfaction, the quality and sincerity of the personal bonds managers create with employees. And recognition culture, observable changes in the mood, happiness, and vibe of the workplace, more pride in the company, values, and daily work, more prevalent recognition. So by the end of step one, you should have a decent roadmap of where to go with measurement that satisfies all of these questions. Next, we're going to look at how to take effective measurements that help tell your ROI stories. So which tangible and intangible metrics will we attempt to change? Which KPIs will we measure to get there? What are our benchmarks? How are they tied to company goals? And how often will we check on progress? As I said before, ROI is a misnomer. We have a well-established equation to figure out ROI, profits over cost. That will not be applicable to most recognition measurements. Remember to think about your return on recognition. Important, accuracy is better than precision. Don't worry so much about calculating a precise value. Instead, focus on the measure that accurately tells your ROI story. For instance, if you're looking for more engagement, a precise number won't be possible, but gathering an accurate picture of employee feedback will be. This is why it is key to choose the measurements that will most effectively tell the ROI story you're following. This leads us to our next poll question, which is, when was the last time you conducted an employee engagement survey? Sylvie, if you could open it up. Give it about 10 more seconds. All right, Sylvie, I think that we can close it and look at the results. Okay, so 25% of the people on this call have conducted an employee engagement survey within the last 3 months, 18% in the last 3 to 6 months, and 57% it's been a year ago or more. So some interesting stats there. All right, Sylvie, we'll go back to the presentation. Okay, so now that we measured the or took that poll on surveys, let's talk about them a little bit more. Employee surveys are common, but still the most effective way to gather data for metrics like engagement, satisfaction, and culture. We all know that things like culture and employee experience are important, but we don't often figure out a way to measure them, so they go unmeasured. I'm here to tell you that employee surveys can be an incredibly effective tool and possibly the only reliable tool for measuring such things. Employees can and will tell you about what's bothering them. You will not be able to measure a recognition program from afar. It takes establishing a benchmark and actively pursuing results. Once again, I cannot stress the importance of surveys enough. They're indispensable when calculating recognition value. So surveys can be as in-depth or as short as you like. Sometimes it's just one question. If you're already using an established survey template like the Gallup Q12, for example, you can pull responses for the questions they ask about engagement and use those. Same with recognition. Many surveys can be drawn up very quickly using an online service like SurveyMonkey. So there really is no excuse not to be giving employee surveys. Much more in-depth methods exist, like the Employee Satisfaction Index created by Hubstaff, but how detailed you get with it depends a lot on your company size and resources available. There's also a way to derive an employee net promoter score based on asking whether or not the employee is likely to refer someone to the organization, which can be helpful. And of course, we can create many opportunities to gather employee feedback through a traditional suggestion box within individual performance reviews and regular check-ins and town hall meetings. So you can also create completely custom surveys to suit your needs. Here's some important topics when it comes to recognition program satisfaction and overall engagement. Extrinsic rewards refers to the tangible rewards given to employees. Supervisory support refers on how happy an employee is with their boss's performance. Reward fairness refers to how appropriately rewards are distributed amongst employees. Autonomy refers to how much freedom employees feel they have to do their jobs. Corporate image refers to how much an employee likes the company. Affinity refers to how supported an employee feels by other employees. And development refers to how satisfied the employee is with the career prospects and opportunities they are provided by the company. So don't leave out social media when it comes to measurement. So it gives a powerful lens to observe the viral culture growth and mystique. I mentioned Instagram earlier, but does your organization have a hashtag that relates to your culture or to your organization? Many of our clients do, and encourage employees to use it when posting about positive happenings. Hashtags are one way that companies use to showcase their culture and values to the public, while using the reach and connections of their employees for their initiatives and recruitment. Whether it's by sharing photos, videos, blogs, or even just a tweet, it is a way to empower employees to share what makes the company a great place to work while attracting job seekers. You can use the power of hashtags to compile and track how many mentions your company culture gets over a given period of time. I highly recommend spending a few minutes looking on Instagram and Twitter to see what hashtags are already being used by your employees. It's very similar to, have you ever Googled yourself? So have you ever looked up your hashtags about yourself? So key recognition platform metrics. So modern recognition platforms have tons of data available and can generate reports to help you track value. You will want to pay attention to the following. Usage data, perhaps the most important recognition KPI. Usage of the platform can be tied to engagement, culture, productivity, and so much more. Nominations and awards given. Tracking how many awards are approved and redeemed within a certain location is a great indicator of employee satisfaction and engagement. Manager participation. Manager-employee relationship is a top driver of engagement. The more managers give out awards and recognition, the more involved they are with employees. So let's take a look at some examples of how you can compare and contrast these metrics with others to further tell your ROI story. Usage data versus customer satisfaction. So measuring recognition activity against customer satisfaction levels can identify specific programs that increase sales, resulting from better customer engagement. So usage data is something that we see a lot with hospitals and retail, and they're unique in that they drill down harder than most on metrics to meet very precise goals. In healthcare, they leverage recognition ROI to move tenths of a decimal to meet patient satisfaction standards. In retail, turnover is costly and always a top priority. So make recognition part of the entire employee experience and leverage usage data to watch how it affects turnover. Any organization can do it. It just takes some work. So another example would be usage data versus safety outcomes. Whether you're trying to log more accident-free days or more safe hours on the road, safety initiative usage data can be measured against outcomes to visualize its value. And usage data versus surveys. See how much recognition is used on a daily basis and see how it correlates to engagement rates. Maybe 60% of the workforce felt appreciated on your last survey. Where is it now? And how much recognition was happening during that time? I'll go back to Gallup again for a moment. Here's what they had to say in 2016 about the importance of managers in realizing the value of recognition. The best managers promote a recognition-rich environment with praise coming from every direction and everyone aware of how others like to receive appreciation. This type of employee feedback should be frequent. Gallup recommends every 7 days and timely to ensure that the employee knows the significance of the recent achievement and to reinforce company values. They also found that nearly a quarter of employees think praise from leaders is more memorable. Managers create value through engagement by spreading praise far and wide, recognizing top, middle, and bottom performers equally. So some more examples. Turnover versus recognition. It's costly, and the causes are not always clear. Asking thoughtful questions during exit interviews can reveal gaps in recognition. Recognition frequency versus business performance. Comparing business performance against recognition frequency can help correlate the impact recognition has on sales performance and profitability. And then employee engagement versus manager-employee relations. So healthy manager-employee relationships are correlated with higher employee engagement. Keeping track of how managers are using the recognition system formally and informally can identify high performers and realize the benefits of their actions. So this is our third and final poll question. Do your leaders and program owners have a formal recurring meeting to report on recognition ROI? Sylvie, if we could open it up. All right, we'll give it about 10 more seconds. Okay, let's look at the results. Wow, 93% of the people on this call do not have a formal recurring meeting to report on recognition ROI. I mean, I guess it makes sense, being that it lines up very well with that 90% didn't have a formal written strategy in place. So very interesting. Thank you, Sylvie. So step 4 in this 4-step process is observe and adjust. Assign a program owner. At the end of the day, decide who is responsible for the recognition program success. Vendors are facilitators, and the buck only stops with you. There needs to be a program owner to hold the whole thing accountable. Schedule regular check-ins. Recognition effects take a while to show up, so space your check-ins effectively, maybe annually, biannually, or even monthly. But just remember that you can't rush the results. Leverage software. As previously stated, modern recognition software has all kinds of ways to capture usage data and other relevant KPIs. But don't stop there. There are several software solutions that can help you track the behaviors you want to track in a quantitative way. See what you can find. Have a process for managers. Open some line of feedback with your frontline managers to report on intangibles like culture, morale, and presenteeism. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Remember, the only constant is change. So roll with the punches and always be thinking creatively about measuring recognition ROI. So once again, benchmarking is what it's all about. If you established benchmarks in steps 1 and 2, this should be cake. The trick is establishing your benchmarks and starting the measurement early on, before your initiatives begin, and then continue measuring after they end. And that's if they're for a limited time. If not, you continue to measure them and then identify the change. But remember that correlation does not equal causation, which is why having an accurate picture of what you're looking for before you begin measuring is so important. Remember, you won't be able to get precise with everything, but you can be very accurate. So if your goal is to increase retention by using an Employee of the Month award, for instance, you know what to look at, retention rates and any data surrounding those awards. From there, you can create an accurate picture of how the addition of the award impacts retention. And we know that several factors go into retention, but by choosing your desired outcomes, you can at least tell a story about the value this kind of recognition brings to those outcomes, and then assign a value to it and add to your ROI story. So what does a recognition ROI report look like? We've been talking a lot about things, but the report itself doesn't have to be too complicated. Keep it simple. First, restate your initial goals and desired outcomes. Those benchmarks I keep stressing, present those to establish your baseline. If you've identified and tracked your relevant metrics, it should be easy to show progress towards those goals. And don't forget the other things we've discussed, like social media presence and employee feedback. Present any data you think will best support your ROI story. So to recap, there's 4 steps that go into measuring the value of recognition. The first step, choosing those desired outcomes. Set clear and simple goals. Think broadly about what metrics can get you there. And there it is again. Establish benchmarks for everything. Benchmark, benchmark, benchmark. And then once you do this, you're ready to move on to step 2, which is identify relevant metrics. Establish your tangibles and intangibles. Be cautious of difficult to measure recognition and identify metrics relevant to your goals. And through all this, as you're doing it, write it down. Put together your written strategy. What are your desired outcomes? Because you may choose them, and a year down the road, if they're nowhere to be found and they're not written down and you're not reporting or benchmarking on them, it's all for naught. Step 3, effectively measure. Use employee surveys to measure culture and engagement, but at the same time, use it in conjunction with your recognition platform metrics, the things that we were talking about, such as logins, awards given, things of that nature. And then don't forget to look at social media presence to see the reach and what it's worth. I think that we all see, we go on to LinkedIn all the time and we see people celebrating their work anniversary, and they're holding up a gift, or they're taking a picture with their colleagues, or they've just been recognized for great work. There's a lot of pride and a lot of saturation out there with your employees on social media. And then observe and adjust. Establish a regular reporting schedule. And don't forget, you have to establish who is the program owner. Be accepting of changes and revisions. And always be improving and layering your initiatives to your program. So a few parting thoughts. Stay focused on your goals. You know, the technology to do this is fairly standard with most recognition providers. But as World at Work noted, almost half of organizations who use recognition don't even have a written strategy for it, not to mention the 90% of the people on this call. This 4-step approach is where you begin. You may not see results immediately, and this is normal. As noted in the overview, recognition takes time and energy to realize. Failure is a great teacher. Don't get discouraged if you don't see immediate results. Culture change takes time to permeate in an organization. Remember that it's all relative, and what works for one organization won't necessarily work for another organization. But hopefully we've shown you a few useful ways you can easily communicate your recognition ROI and made it a little less intimidating. So I also wanted to share some additional resources with everybody. You should be able to click these on the downloadable PDF after the call, but there's the link to the Gallup Q12, the Hub Staff ESI method, the Employee Net Promoter Score method, a podcast that was recently aired by Incentive Magazine on how to measure the ROI of reward programs, and a great tool that's offered. It's a recognition strength finder that helps you gauge where you are in terms of the maturity of your recognition initiatives and program. So finally, I'd like to wrap up, and I'd like to take a minute and thank and recognize my marketing team for all of their hard work on this presentation and all the other great content they assist in producing. And thank all of you, and again, for taking the time to join this webinar. And please take a minute to complete the final evaluation survey. We do have a few minutes left, so I'd be happy to take any questions, and I'll ask Sylvie to help facilitate that.
Okay, our audience has been really active throughout this presentation, sending feedback and asking questions. So we'll just start with the very first one that came in from Davan. And the question is, tell me if I'm wrong, is it only the remuneration who plays important role for employee satisfaction?
I'm sorry, can you hold
Yeah.
on? I just opened it up. So tell me if I'm wrong, is only the remuneration who plays important role for employee satisfaction? I'm not sure what that's asking. I'm so sorry. But Devon, please feel free to email me at cord.himelstein@halo.com. And I'd be happy to get back to you. So regarding formal recognition, what does a corporate reward system entail? I mean, it could be everything, and this is from Jeremy Wilder. I mean, this could be everything from years of service award program to rewards tied to going above and beyond with nominations and managers being able to nominate employees and employees being able to nominate one another. It could be through what we refer to as bulk uploads, where there's an initiative that somebody takes part in, and you can award a large quantity of recognition or points to a large population. There's a ton of different things that goes into a formal recognition system. What is the definition of KPI? So these are key performance indicators. Thank you, Francis. And then Abdullah Musa asked, how does one develop a purposeful baseline or benchmark to ensure it is not demotivating? I think that you need to be honest with yourself. And when you look at that initial benchmark and you see that you may have, high turnover rates or poor, engagement scores, that you need to take an honest look in the mirror and know that there's only one place to go, hopefully, and that's up. And then, it's only the south. Somebody said, okay, copy, please. Also, do we number events? Okay, somebody said, copy as well, please. Also, we do a number of events, parties, but get a low participation and usually the same people. Suggestions to increase attendance at these events. So I'm assuming that these would be recognition events that you're talking about, and I think that marketing them and getting the word out and making sure that there's an awareness and a knowledge of them is key. And if you'd like, please feel free to email me and can give you some ideas about communicating it. Did anything else come in? No, I think
there were some questions that came in through the chat. Let me see if I can find them. In the meanwhile, regarding the slides, if you click on the link that I sent to you in chat and through the questions area, it will take you to the posting of this webcast on our site, on hr.com's site. Click that open and you'll see a button for the downloads.
Great.
So everybody has access to that. Here's a question from Stacy. How do you do something like an employee poll if you're a very small organization, 2 to 4 employees?
I mean, that is pretty small. I mean, again, you could use something like SurveyMonkey, and a poll of that size, I mean, may not even cost you anything. I mean, you do a little research, identify the questions you'd like to ask, make sure that it's anonymous so that the people that do respond, know that their answers are confidential, and use it that way.
Okay, and then Sarah asks, what is typically a good participation percentage for an employee survey?
Ooh, I am not the survey expert. I just like using them. So I kind of hesitate to speak on that. I like to see things in the 70 to 80%, but that's the participation I like to look at. It also depends on how large your organization is. So if the person with 4 employees only has a 70% participation rate, it may be a little less telling than somebody with 10,000 employees at a 75% rate.
Well, here's an interesting question from Jose. Hello there. I would be curious to ask if there's any case of a company which tried to implement a recognition program and it failed.
Not with us. No, look, I think that, a lot of considerations go into it. I don't think that any have failed. I think that, some, back when we saw the recession, we saw budgets get cut, and part of that cut was downsizing or even eliminating recognition programs. I haven't really seen a recognition program fail, especially if they're putting the proper benchmarks in place and they're measuring and they're clear with their desired outcomes and goals. If you're going to launch a recognition program just to have a recognition program, there may be some issues and you may run into some problems there.
Okay,
right.
And is it only the salary that gives satisfaction to the employees?
No, absolutely not. I don't think I mentioned that, but I mean, salary is just one piece of it. And salary is, as long as you're being paid fairly, it's only one piece. It's your relationship with your manager. It's your career path and room for growth. I mean, you can get a great paycheck, but if your future looks like you're going to be in the same role forever at the same salary, and you're not being appreciated and your career path isn't being set, that's not going to be a very satisfied employee. It's a full package, the total rewards. You need to make sure that everything's right. There is no one silver bullet. So I'd say absolutely not.
Okay, I'm scrolling through the chat and I don't believe I see any more questions there.
Okay.
Oh, here's a reply from Devan. My major reason for asking it is that in India, it's a tendency where the management has that perspective. How can it be changed? And that's referring to the salary being the only way to reward.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that it sounds like a cultural thing. And again, if you want to email me, Devon, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, I'd be happy to get back to you.
Terrific. Well, it looks like we got to the end of that.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again, everybody. Again, please take the time. Your feedback is very important to me and to HR.com, and I thank HR.com and again, my awesome team for helping me put this together and all the other great content they helped me put together. So thanks, everybody.
And thank you very much from HR.com to Cord Himelstein and to Halo Recognition for educating our audience today. It was fun. Just a few reminders for our attendees. If you'd like to view this webcast again, the archive recording and slides will be available for up to 7 days for our free members. And of course, if you have a recertification membership or HR Genius membership, you have unlimited access. All webcast credits are stored in your HR.com account under View My Credits. You will also receive an email from HR.com within 1 to 2 business days with your certification credit information. As Cord mentioned, your feedback is important to us. Please take a moment to fill out the exit survey that will appear in a separate browser window. Make sure you don't close that down once the webcast is ended. This concludes our webcast. Enjoy the rest of your day.